Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 113 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. In this episode I continue my interview with Raymond Barrett and we discuss the Middle East, the prices of oil and gas, and general energy issues. I hope you enjoy this episode. It comes in at about 22 minutes. Once again, apologies for the quality of the sound. Thank you. Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox, and I'm back with Raymond Barrett on part 2 of our visit of all things, just all things. Not to steal the all things considered, but Raymond is a true Renaissance man, the head of the Washington Bureau. He's Washington Bureau Chief for PAR and writes and thinks about a wide variety of issues. In part 1 of our visit, we talked about the recent ACI FCPA National Conference held near Washington, and we riffed off from that down to the Brazil and the Petrobras ongoing corruption scandal. But now, Raymond, I wanted to turn to some of the events in the Middle East. And as you know, I'm here in Houston, so the price of oil is something that we talk about all the time. And so there are many different theories on the price of oil as we talk today. I think it's still hovering around $80 a barrel, down from about $100 a barrel. Like I said, many theories as to why the price of oil may be down at this point. Perhaps oversupply of the system, perhaps political reasons. One thought is that the United States and Saudi Arabia are driving the price of oil down to further sanction Russia. Whatever the reason is, the price has dropped. I think I paid $2.30 for a gallon of gas yesterday, which I have not paid in many years. But from where you sit, and certainly your background as a journalist in the Middle East, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, in DC, it's $2.99, which isn't bad.
Wow.
Then I actually have paid up to $4 here in the past, so within $2.99 isn't too bad. Well, I suppose, of course, in the last few years, the whole kind of oil energy conversation has been changed by the boom in fracking in the US, and the conversation has changed from oil dependence to oil independence, after one. The handicapping the price of oil has always been a very dangerous business, and so I try to avoid that too much. But then, what I can talk about are the kind of geopolitical relationships, and that if it's in U.S. interests to drive the price of oil down in order to put pressure on both, say, Iran and Russia, for example, the U.S. has never had a more solid partner than Saudi Arabia, as in the famous kind of picture of the former U.S. President Bush and the King of Saudi Arabia walking together holding hands. Well, they kind of hold hands both in personal terms, but also in the broader political spectrum as well. So then, if the U.S. was looking for a OPEC push to kind of increase production and drive down prices, I don't think Saudi Arabia would be against that in the short term, at least.
Another issue that is also in the mind of people here in Houston because of a specific legal action is the following. A tanker with oil from Iraq, or perhaps from the Kurdish-controlled portion of Iraq, came to Houston, and there's a current legal fight over who owns that oil. And that has led many here in Houston to think about how independent are the Kurds. Is there going to be a Kurdistan? I think many in the oil business here in Houston are more comfortable dealing with Kurds and the Kurdish semi-autonomous state because of that it's perceived to be more stable than perhaps the Iraqi government, and perhaps even less corrupt. But there's no resolution to the specific tanker issue here. But the issue of an independent Kurdistan or a Kurdish state in Iraq or anywhere in that part of the world brings up lots of different issues for the energy industry. What do you see? What at least issues do you see involved?
Well, I suppose the old-fashioned saying is like follow the money, and basically the very fact that the international oil companies, and I believe in particular US companies, feel comfortable investing and doing business in Kurdistan means that they see that, I believe, going forward as either towards independence or at least keeping it sort of say de facto, if not de jure, independence in the rest of the country. Because if you look through the rest of Iraq, uncertainty reigns. I believe somewhere like in the south of Iraq, like Basra, you will find Chinese investment, which is a bit more happy to kind of accept some of the geopolitical risks maybe than a US company. So I think the fact that you have US companies, US oil companies invested up there for so long, not only shows their belief that in the potential of the region, but also that oil activity ultimately will underpin and only strengthen independent Kurdistan as well. I think the interesting thing to see is, given there's been some troubles between the US government and the government in Baghdad about sort of say the US troops staying there, what kind of role they can ever have, and if the US government is throwing its support behind Kurdistan, it'll be interesting to see how that is played out in the US courts, for example, as in whether or not we get any sense through the US court system whether or not Washington is leaning more towards the Kurds or towards Baghdad.
You know, from an FCPA perspective, I'm occasionally asked the following question. When you have an independent autonomous group such as the Kurds in Iraq, or you have a ongoing revolution in a certain country and rebels take control, are those rebels, is that independent autonomous group, are they government officials for the purposes of the FCPA? And I will find that, U.S. government may well take that position. Certainly in a prosecutorial role if bribes are paid to get energy, and certainly if the rebels or the independent autonomous group, as Pete Townsend once said, meet the old boss, same as the new boss, won't get fooled again. One of my favorite lines about business.
Well, it beggars the question then, if a person bribes somebody in ISIS, are you bribing an actual government official or not? And then they're a self-declared government. So then I think what we can see really is that given the broad interpretation that the DOJ has had of kind of issues like its instrumentality and whatnot, I really do think that like if any group, breakaway or not, it has sort of almost declared themselves a government, is acting like a government, I'm pretty sure that the DOJ will be able to find an argument to actually bring a case. As in, be it in a case like sort of Haiti Telco or Petro Tiger, those issues of who is a government official or not are being played out, but I think every time it seems to be that the courts seem to side with the DOJ's fairly broad view of sort of what equals either a official of a government or a company acting on behalf of a government or not.
Raymond, if I can go back to the autonomous Kurdish Republic or Kurdistan and talk about what implications might you see for the greater region if the Kurds can somehow either get direct independence or at least have a semi-autonomous republic in Iraq. Does that bring up implications for either Syria or a more close U.S. ally, Turkey?
Yes, for sure. As in, I think in a way that the Kurds seem to have been very, very practical of late, in that given their pretty strong ties with the US, I think they know that a fully autonomous, independent Kurdistan in Iraq with a seat at the UN would be a very big headache for the US right now. Because basically it would then pose a whole bunch of questions that not just the US, but that like the UN and the Western powers for years have sort of pushed under the table. Like as in Syria, Lebanon, those borders and boundaries are very loose. Part of Turkey as well, obviously, with a large Kurdish population. I think there's just a lot of questions there that neither the EU or the US really wants to have to deal with right now. So I wouldn't be surprised, given that the strong support that the US has shown for the Kurds, that they might just stop and hold back from making that last official step, but be, say, independent in everything but name only.
A if I could turn to another topic, which you have written on extensively and have thought about, which is the Emirates, Dubai, and their role in this region. At a prior podcast, you talked about how the Emirates, Dubai, and the UAE see themselves as commercial operators in an area that is perhaps fluid in geopolitical leanings. But I was wondering, has your view on that changed, or do you see what the UAE and Dubai and other Emirate states doing? Is it really a continuation of what you've all seen them do?
I think there's been a subtle shift in recent years in that the smaller nation states like, say, Qatar, for example, historically would have been a bit more on the fence, maybe on the issue between Iran and the US. So I definitely see that since the Arab Spring, at least vocally, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and some of the kind of sunny Gulf states have been a little bit more leaning towards, a bit more aggressive in their stance towards Iran. Maybe those countries have always been very strong allies of the US, but maybe they've been a bit more vocal in public and have been a bit more engaged. Like, for example, the Air Force of the UAE and I believe Qatar were involved in Libya and whatnot. So they've started to take a slightly more proactive role in the region. And the one thing I would say is that if you do take that more kind of active role, you have to be also prepared for the blowback as well. So as in, there have been some subtle shifts there, but somewhere like Dubai historically has kind of kept its role of being a sort of a place where both Iran and the US can operate, where they can do business and talk. And I think the kind of ongoing nuclear talks in Vienna right now are very interesting. And how those pan out, if we get an agreement between the P5+1 and Iran, I can definitely see there being like a second flourishing in Dubai and in the Gulf states, as all the companies who want to gain access to Iran maybe have their regional hub somewhere like Dubai and then kind of fly in and out and do business in Iran as well.
Now, Dubai has been a regional hub for many U.S. companies for many years. I've been stationed in Dubai for Halliburton, but name the Western Energy Company, certainly one's headquartered here in Houston, and they have a presence in Dubai. So is that something new, or is that just a logical extension of what's gone on for many years?
I think it's a very logical extension. Historically, in that part of the world, the British, given its sort of historical past, had a very kind of active presence in the region, and its British companies have been very kind of active and been based there for decades, basically. So I think it's only natural as sort of Dubai turned its attention from being a regional hub to a global hub, that the US companies would kind of engage there as well.
Raymond, I think one thing most Americans don't have a full appreciation of is the difference between the states of the UAE, of the Emirates, I should say. Mm-hmm. So the UAE and Dubai and Qatar, could you maybe speak to some of the differences that we here in the States may not fully appreciate, because there are differences?
Indeed. I think the kind of hardest misconception is to actually fully grasp both what the UAE is, that the United Arab Emirates is on paper, and what it is in fact. So basically, when the British pulled out, as they said, east of Suez in the late 60s, early 70s, prior to that, they had a system of protectorates. These were very small, quasi-independent states with an emir as the leader. And when the British were pulling out, they basically said these entities are too small to exist on their own. So they encouraged them to come together. One of the little known facts is that originally the British wanted Bahrain and Qatar to be part of the UAE. But then they were big enough to actually form independent states in the early 70s. The UAE essentially, I think the best thing to understand is that outside of Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and possibly Sharjah. The other emirates of Ras Al Khaimah, Fujairah, Al Quwain, Ajman think of them as very small US states. I'm talking like something like maybe Rhode Island, Vermont, Delaware. And that essentially despite the fact that on paper all 7 emirates are on equal footing, essentially the nation state or the federal government of the UAE is underwritten by Abu Dhabi. So as in, I like to say Abu Dhabi is primo inter pares, first among equals, and that essentially speaking, when it comes to voicing kind of international foreign policy of the UAE, you're essentially hearing the foreign policy of Abu Dhabi. Dubai has kind of, to a certain extent, been happy to let Abu Dhabi assume that role as a federal government and to engage in politics, and Dubai has kept for itself that more of sort of Hong Kong role as a regional economic hub.
And then that gets to the next question I wanted to pose. If you go to Dubai, it feels like commerce. It really has that feel about the city. Could you contrast directly Abu Dhabi with Dubai?
Yes. I'm always reminded of that great line in Goodfellas when they're talking about Paulie, who was the kind of boss, and basically they said Paulie moved kind of slow, but that's because Paulie didn't have to move for anybody, and that's a bit like Abu Dhabi in that regard. When you have a nation state with that much oil, that much energy, and a small population, they really don't have to bend and accommodate global commerce so much. Then, basically speaking, they've got a very large oil and gas reserves, very small population. Thus, the economy isn't as dynamic. It's more controlled by the ruling family. It's slower. There's less diversity. Whereas, if you contrast that with Dubai's oil essentially ran out maybe 20 years ago. So it kind of had to do something else, and it kind of went back to its kind of historical role as a place for trade, smuggling, and whatnot. And because it actually had a comparative advantage in that, it has a large kind of Indian, Asian community, Iranian community who are very tied into the kind of trade in the region. It sort of exploited that actually as well. So I think that's the contrast between the two.
And I think one thing that many Americans don't think of specifically about Dubai is the physical trade, the shipping. Certainly the Hong Kong-esque banking system, the financial system, the legal system, those types of things. But a large part of Dubai is still, you called it smuggling. I would just say, or at least alluded to that, but I would certainly say shipping and commerce is a large part of what the commercial activity of Dubai is.
Yes, for sure. As in, I think it's very important to note that the rise of China as being the kind of great mass producer of things the world consumes, and Dubai's rise are not independent. So say, for example, be it auto parts, be it furniture, all these things are to produce and mass produced in China. Historically, these get shipped on sort of trade routes, and Dubai is one of the largest kind of ports in the world that can kind of handle all that kind of flow. And then what happens in Dubai sometimes is that things get almost consolidated there and then get shipped to Africa, to Europe, and other places. So then clearly Dubai has benefited from China's emergence as the world's biggest exporter, basically.
I wanted to end with asking you if there were maybe 2 or 3 things that you're looking at in the Middle East and energy, or things that people here in the United States might consider watching. Not really asking you to predict anything, but just things that we should watch in relation to energy in the Middle East. Do you have any thoughts along those lines?
Maybe not so much purely on the energy, but on defense contracting in terms of sort of the anti-corruption, yes, for sure. As in, I attended an event a few weeks ago where we had counsel from various big U.S. defense contractors, Raytheon, in Northrop Grumman, talking about how, given the big cuts in U.S. defense spending, how these companies are starting to almost kind of look to overseas sales even more. And in particularly looking at for like the Middle East, and they mentioned Saudi Arabia and the UAE. I think one of the things to note is that just because a company has an established presence in a country like Saudi Arabia, it doesn't mean that if you move into a new business partner, there aren't new risks. So the classic example is if you're a defense contractor, you have been dealing with the Ministry of Defense for years. But since the Arab Spring, the countries in the Middle East are increasing their spending on internal security, be it like sort of say cybersecurity, monitoring emails, mobile phone data, National Guard, crowd suppressive policing as well. So, and those ministries often tend to have closer ties to the ruling families than the Ministry of Defense, because ultimately these countries know that the biggest threat comes not from external threats, but from internally. Like then, if you look at most of the power shifts in the Persian Gulf countries in the last 25 years, they've been what we call palace coups, kind of internal kind of changeover. So, for example, Northrop Grumman is increasing, I believe, cybersecurity solutions, selling those kind of things in the Middle East. I think it's very important to be careful that those ministries often tend to be have very close ties to the ruling families. So I think that's an issue that kind of almost deserves careful attention.
Well, that's a very interesting point, and let me tie that specifically to an FCPA enforcement action that happened. I think it was concluded in August, but perhaps September, and that's the Smith & Wesson enforcement action. And there, it was a Securities and Exchange Commission agreed upon settlement. Smith & Wesson did not admit or deny any of the allegations. Nevertheless, one of the criticisms voiced by the SEC was that Smith & Wesson went overseas without the appropriate internal controls for their compliance program. And I guess the takeaway I would take from your comments are that the companies you named certainly would have robust compliance programs, but if they're going to move into those areas, that would possibly constitute new risks that they need to manage a little bit more closely. And I hope that the compliance function would be working hand in hand with the business units to manage those enhanced compliance risks.
Indeed, for sure.
Well, Raymond, as always, it is way too much fun. We probably could do this for several more hours, but it's been a great visit. I have to say, the snowfall is really coming down now, so I'm getting cold just watching you.
Indeed, yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun. I want to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving.
And you too, Tom. Always a pleasure.